20 years ago or even 10 years ago, people wouldn't even consider coaching as a career. I think my upbringing with my dad and how I observed his demeanor, how he presents himself, how he behaves as a coach was impactful. He is highly motivated. He wants to share his knowledge. And through that experience, I realized that's something that I wanted to do when I grew up. As a coach, you have to ask yourself, what is the baseline to do sports? And I think that is very important because you are putting yourself in a situation where you can influence and guide the younger generation to be the best that they can be. When one goes into coaching, to me, it is a profession. Like in any other profession, you go in that process of mastery. And there's so much knowledge, so much information that's being shared, but particularly with the modern technology. It is something that you need to spend a lot of time to master your skill. Being a coach, one has to be imaginative and creative. So I found it meaningful and found it useful to one's career path when they decide on why they coach and what's their coaching philosophy. I've shared this philosophy that was a favorite of one of the legendary coach from Australia. His name is Forbes Carlyle. He was one of the pioneers in swim coaching. And he would use this motto as his guiding coaching philosophy. And it goes like this. It says, "We are not here to create champions, but an environment where champions are inevitable." From that phrase, you know it is all about creating that environment that is conducive enough to bring out the best of an individual. And yeah, you're going to have coaches who say, hey, why don't we just try and push the young ones, get the results that we need? And by saying that, particularly for the young ones, it's easy to coach to get the results because you can train them like adults, load them with high intensity training and so forth, and get the results that you want almost within one season. But again, is it in the best interest of the growing child? And that is a question that as a coach we need to ask ourselves. Yes, every coach wants to produce an Olympic champion, but not everyone's going to do it. But then what's the baseline for it? Meaning of champion can vary across the board. It doesn't mean being an Olympic champion. It means that when you go through the path of training and adaptation, especially as a young individual, you are picking up life skills as you go along. In a way, we are preparing the student athletes for the challenges in life. And through those experiences in an environment where it's conducive, then you will find yourself making that adjustment so that you can fulfill your goal. I think here as a coach, we try and use the opportunity to share and educate the parents of the process. Through that process, I believe that parents need to understand what's the baseline, and then that is to help the kid grow up healthy. We'll fall back to the club's philosophy, what we stand for, and then we'll take the opportunity to educate the parents, the different stages of learning. And each stage has its period: learning the skill, learning to train, and learning to compete. And eventually, if they show that they have the skill sets to go further, we are ready for it. One has to build up the foundation. And that was something that I wanted to do with the swim club, creating that environment for the swimmers to grow up in, for the coaches to grow up in, and knowing and understanding what's the true meaning behind the sport. That phrase itself, we are not here to create champions, but an environment where champions are inevitable. It says so much about my own upbringing and where we are heading towards. As a young kid, I've always observed how my father would coach judo, which is probably his first love. And the first thing I remember was once we enter the area, we have to actually bow and pay our respect to the venue. I think judo has always been something my dad really enjoyed. It's a passion. He's given a lot to the sport. Through his coaching, that's what I picked up, and that's what I'm doing for swimming. So this word, run, it looks very familiar, and that's something that I will put on my desk. You're being taught how to be patient and how to manage your own emotions and expectations, and being able to move with the flow. Probably something that I felt in terms of not falling is not getting too caught up with the politics of it. Knowing that you're there to give your best to the sport, and sometimes things may not work out, and it's okay to move on. And I think that's something that probably where my dad felt hurt. So this is something that I would not allow myself to be caught up with. That upbringing actually gave me a sense of the Japanese culture in doing things with mindfulness and the presence. And this brings me to the word ikigai, which is doing things with a purpose. I only came across the word actually last year, and that actually really summarized what we are all about. For every individual that is in that organization, we keep sharing that you're here for a purpose. And again, as a swim teacher, we are here to impart skills. Every person in the organization is there for a reason, to make the best outcome of the people that we interact with. What's interesting is now that we have a Japanese coach, he has this ritual that he will do before training starts. He'll get the kids to do some exercises and all that. And once they finish their warm-up on land, then he'll say, today I'll do my best, and you do your best, and then they'll bow to each other. It just goes to reflect the relationship that he has with the swimmers and that level of respect for one another. As human beings, we are all competitive in nature, but it's for us to decide which path that we want to go on. My upbringing is I was left alone. I was not pushed, and when the time came, when it was right, I just blossomed. And looking back, if you look at the coaching philosophy of the different stages of learning and then towards competing, it all makes sense. And that approach actually gave me a solid foundation to become stronger. And eventually, when I got to compete with the rest of the world, that's where my advantage was. That correlation kind of set the foundation for the swim club. Through my dad's way of interacting, and how he coaches, and my own experience growing up as an athlete. At the end of the day, it's really, you're picking a sport that you would allow the individual to grow up in a safe environment. You can experience many failures and more about yourself in order for you to be a better person at the end. One of the biggest mistakes that a parent could do is to set their own expectation on the child. And that being said, most parents will want them to go on to represent the country or be like a Joseph Schooling, win the Olympic gold medals. It is okay in a way that there is a dream to it, but at the same time, the parent needs to understand that process. How long does it take, and what is required of them to fulfill that goal. And at the end, not everybody is going to make it. So I would always remind the parents that the baseline is we want them to grow up healthy, and we want their body to fully develop to a stronger person. Going back to my childhood days, when it rains, all of us would actually go out and play in the mud. We still play soccer, we still run around, we cycle around in the rain. Nowadays, you don't see as many of that, And I think growing up as a child, one has to be stimulated in that way. One needs to know how to express themselves in a physical way. That brings me back to the days of Farrer Park, Although being a swimmer, I would spend my time going to the Farrer Park track stadium and watch how they train and how they perform. And if the field is open, then we'll call our friends, hey, why don't we gather and just play a game? Having that opportunity to kind of physically express ourselves, expend the energy in sports would make the child, a well-balanced individual. So going back to the baseline, that should be the fundamental reason why parents should introduce sports to their child. As a coach during this pandemic period, it's important for us to, stay creative and innovative in how we design programs within the safety measures. Whether we like it or not, we still have to continue living, and that's important to all of us. During the earlier circuit breakers, coaches did the Zoom exercises with their athletes, and they do it at their homes. It was a challenge because certain coaches may need to learn very quickly how to use technology to their advantage. And we've seen some, positive outcome from that. But nothing beats going outdoors and exercising. So with the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games in Tokyo, you have different views to host it, not to host it. But being an Olympian myself, I understand that there is a need to observe safety measures that's required with the worldwide pandemic. On that note, we only can use the platform of sports to inspire the world that if the athletes can do it through this period of time of the pandemic and still come up with record-breaking performances, that itself would actually send a message to people that you can still continue to exercise and stay strong. And until the time when this pandemic comes under control. I think that messaging is just as important because as human beings, we are always looking for that level of inspiration.